Welcome to the Bucher and Friends podcast. Here is your host.
Let's send it over to Rick Bucher.
Rick Bucher.
All right, welcome to a very special edition of Bucher and Friends, subsidiary of the United WeCast Network. I'm Rick Bucher. You can find my stuff on Bleacher Report. You can see me on FS1, and you can find me on Twitter at Rick Bucher. It is now my pleasure. I have a special guest. This is normally a day where Ryan Hollins sits in, but he's traveling. And with the NCAA tournament coming to a close, I thought it would be a good time, an ideal time, to bring on a friend of mine, Burton Chawla. He wanted me to introduce him as a consultant. And as you guys all know, a consultant can mean any damn thing. He's a jack of all trades, and but considers, or at least I do and many other people do, a master of one, which is college sports betting. Burton, how did I do?
Rick, perfect. And yes, consultant means many different things. And you know me, I try to keep it vague.
Yes.
Especially when I'm in the social scenes, I try to keep it as vague as possible and keep it moving. But yes, I do fancy myself a master of maybe one or two trades, including this tournament.
But we all have a Burton in our lives, by the way, for my listeners. We all know a Burton. And you don't know exactly. In fact, I have a couple, to be honest with you. I have another friend of mine who speaks Russian. He's a pilot. He's got a lot of money. I don't know how he made it. Every time I ask him, so what is it exactly that you do? He changes the subject. So I am familiar with your ilk, if you will. And but Burton is a good friend, and if you talk to people in the NBA, they will tell you there is nobody who watches more college basketball in particular than Burton. And so with mybookie.ag being part of the show, particularly over the next couple of days, I thought this would be an ideal combination. Now, if you don't know about mybookie.ag, they've been in business for years. They're reputable. They pay out fast. And we have a special deal going right now where they're actually going to give you money to bet with. I'm not kidding. We're going to bring Burton on. We're going to tell you how to bet it. And then mybookie.ag is actually going to give you extra money. That's right. Whatever you put into your account, you put in $20, they're going to bump it 50%. You put $1,000 in, they're going to make it $1,500. All you have to do is put my name, Bucher, B-U-C-H-E-R, in the promo code, and away you go. You've got more money to play with than even you expected. And Burton's going to show you or tell you exactly how you can make that little nest egg even bigger into like a dinosaur egg. All right, so again, it's MyBookie, MyBookie.ag. I guarantee you this weekend and Monday night are going to be way more fun if you put a couple bucks down and take advantage of the knowledge that Burton is about to drop on you. All you have to do is make sure that you put my name in the promo code for your 50% bonus. All right, so with all that said, we've got finally the Final Four. We've got Auburn up against Virginia. We've got Texas Tech against Michigan State. I'm looking at some lines here. I'm just wondering, Burton, I'm going to start right here. Where do you start as what are the smartest plays when it comes to these two games?
I'll jump into the smartest plays that I think work. And I think you know me a little bit in how I, quote-unquote, bet or gamble. I take some pretty calculated, quote-unquote, risk.
Yes.
Rather than just gamble it out there, right? But I will say this, and I definitely want to circle back on it in regards to the MyBookie bonus. The bonus, or in some cases when I get ahead, that's when I take some real chances. That's the sort of like strategy I have to kind of get the big payouts when you take those chances.
Play with the house money.
To answer your question, yeah, exactly. Play with the house money. So to answer your question on what I think the smart bets are, here are the two smart bets that I think I'm going to do this weekend. And obviously I haven't placed them yet. I don't know what lines you're looking at. I'm looking at Virginia -6 and Michigan State -2.5. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, I have 2.5 Texas Tech, Michigan State, Texas Tech getting 2.5, and I have Auburn, or I have Virginia rather laying. I have 5.5, but 5.5, 6.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the Michigan State minus 2.5 is a great bet. You know a little bit about me. I don't love laying a lot of points, especially in this tournament. I mean, we all know it, right? Like, it always comes down to those couple of missed free throws at the end.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, the 6 points you laid out, it's like, damn, they won the game, and they won it pretty handily, but it ended up being 5 because of some stupid 3 at the end. So I love the 2.5 that Michigan State's laying. Here's why. Although Texas Tech has played phenomenal basketball in this tournament, and so has Michigan State. Here's why I like it. Texas Tech gets into funks offensively. And I think that there is going to be a moment. I mean, they played a game earlier this year against NC State where they scored like 42 points or something to that extent. I think it was in January. And so they get into these funks, and I think that that's the funk that you want to stay away from. Teams like that sometimes struggle with scoring can easily lose a game that was close the whole time by 8. Next thing you know, it's an 8-point game. Right. And Michigan State has played such great basketball. Cassius Winston is just one of those like Michigan State and/or upperclassmen point guards that just got it rolling, got his team rolling, and it was really impressive what they did against Duke, who I think most people had in the Final Four and a lot of people had as champions, considering how stacked their squad was. And I just love Michigan State minus 2.5. I'm not a big guy that goes into over-unders. I think you know that. I love to just bet on money lines, and I'll tell you what I'm doing with money lines. But if I had $100 and I just wanted to place a bet on $100, I would, or I just had $1 million and I only wanted to place one bet, it would be Michigan State minus 2.5. I think that's a great bet because of all of the things I said. Obviously, Culver's a great player, but he's a pass-oriented player, and he's not necessarily a guy that's going to go out there and get you 25. Whereas between Cassius and Coins, who's an underrated player, and Nick Ward, Michigan State is rolling, and I can easily see them win by 7 or 8. And maybe you sweat it. Maybe it's a 5-point game with a minute left, and you sweat it a little bit. But I think they cover 2.5.
I think that's very smart, especially with someone like Cassius, because I just feel like he has such a firm hand on the game and control of the game that it's not going to get away from you. If they have a lead at the end, it's not going to get sloppy and crazy. They're going to be able to work the clock. They're not going to do anything. You're not going to. I don't imagine you having big swings with Michigan State at this point in the tournament with Cassius at the helm.
To your point, especially if they're ahead, right? Like if they're ahead by 10 points at the 4-minute mark,
they milk the hell out of that.
Oh yeah. You're not worried that things going to get away from them.
Yeah.
And then as part of my evaluation, like take a look at it. Okay, if I really like Michigan State minus 2.5, obviously I don't love them. I love Texas Tech plus 2.5. But look at the money lines. The plus 125 for Texas Tech. I mean, it's not a terrible line, but I just don't believe that. It's hard to bet against Izzo here, right? Hard to take that money line at plus 125. I mean, if you give me a plus 200 there, I would take a hard look at that. But plus 125, there's not a lot of payout there for taking a risk against a team that, is inexperienced compared to Michigan State. Obviously, I think Texas Tech is a very good team. I'm also shocked that they got this far.
Yeah. I also put
I'm just looking at it from a math standpoint.
Yeah. I put value in what Michigan State has also been through to this point. And even going to the Tom Izzo, Aaron Henry, like they've already had to weather a emotional storm in some ways, or the spotlight, and I believe that ultimately that whole event has brought this team closer together. And
yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think also, and Draymond better than I do. I think, and I know Mateen Cleaves a little bit. I think guys who sign up for that, they sign up for that, and they all rally around that, right? Like it's not a moment. It's not a Bobby Knight situation. It's more of a situation of like, well, that's what I signed up for. I don't mind coach yelling at me because I wasn't running back. And I think you're right. They rallied around it, and I think they've used it as a rallying point to get this far, in a similar way that I think Virginia used the idea of us getting knocked out last year in the first round against the first ever 16 beating of one. I think they've used it as a rallying point and as a way to like come together because all those guys are still on the same team. Like they didn't lose anybody from last year. So, and we'll get to Virginia in a second, but I think you're right. And you know, I was going to mention the money line from Michigan State at minus 160. It's still not a great bet, right? Like you land 160 to get 100. I don't love that. Again, if I had $100 or if you told me I could make one bet this weekend, one, and to max out that number, I'd lay 2.5. I really would. You know, I don't love over and unders because you know guys it's especially hard to evaluate an over under at the Final Four in the championship because now they're thrown into this stadium instead of a regular gym, and that's a hard thing to evaluate. So I love Michigan State. If you told me one bet, Michigan State minus 2.5.
And what are you getting? What do you have on that? What are you getting on that?
So what
What's
I'm
the
going to
pay?
end up doing, so it's minus 110, right? So I'm going to end up betting 550 to win 500. 500. I'm actually up. I'm going to tell you listeners a little bit in my life. I'm up for the tournament $6,000. So I'm the type of gambler or bettor that's not going to put $6,000 on the line. I want to walk away from this tournament no matter what happens this weekend at a positive, a net positive. So for me, I'm going to lay $500 on that. I think it's a safe enough bet, and you know, I'd obviously love to win 500. I'm going to bet 550. To win 500. And to me, it's a safe enough bet. Well, if I win 500, you know me, that's a nice little Saturday night for me the following week.
Sure.
So.
You and Charles
that's
Oakley
what I love.
hanging.
That's my best friend. So,
As a little background, so the three of us, I'm not kidding, Burton, myself, and Charles.
And Howard. So Howard was there.
Who?
Howard Beck was there.
Who?
Howard
No,
Beck.
it was just you, me, and Oak. There was other people in the bar, but it was just the three of us. I'm kidding. Howard is my colleague at Bleacher Report. He was there as well. But Oak kind of popped up out of nowhere and regaled us. He was meeting somebody else, right? He wasn't there to meet us.
No, you know what it was? He was looking around.
Yeah.
I feel like he was just trying to look around to see who was in the bar. And he knows you, obviously. So I think when he saw you, he felt comfortable hovering around us.
Yes.
Until I made him sit
and
down.
then you just you invited him to play in a spades tournament, and you just took off. And as you said, you guys are now best friends. You're hanging out.
That's my best friend.
Yeah.
Best man at my Hindu wedding one day.
There you go. All right, so that's the explanation as to how Oak enters this story. And I'm glad you gave people the background on what you've done in the tournament so far. Virginia, Auburn. I'll start by saying Auburn to me is such an up and down team, and up and down teams scare me when you get to this point in the tournament.
Yeah, they are, but they're red hot. They have not lost in the month of March. Obviously, this will be their first game in the month of April. They've not lost in the month of March. They are a fast and furious team. I mean, they can score with the best of them in the country. You may or may not believe me, I had them in the Final Four. I had them beating North Carolina. I had them beating Kentucky. And I think a lot of people were shocked that they beat North Carolina because North Carolina plays a similar style game, but North Carolina has All-Americans, especially Kobe White. But that's the advantage that Auburn has, I think, against a lot of teams. And I have Virginia winning this game, and I'll get into what I'm going to bet on. But the advantage, and I think Ryan Holland said this to you, you're looking for alphas out there.
Right.
And Harper and Brown, their backcourt are both alphas. And in addition to that alpha mentality, they both were underrated, especially Harper, who's a little guy, and Brown, who's not hyper athletic, not five-star recruits, not guys that got offers from Duke and North Carolina, or even in their own conference from schools like Kentucky or Tennessee. And they play every game that way. And the reason I had them in the Final Four was the way they played that SEC tournament was thoroughly impressive. I mean, those two kids are tough as nails. They shoot the lights out, especially Harper. I mean, when he's open at the three-point line, the college three-point line, I mean, it's almost I almost feel like a flashback to Dirk Nowitzki. Like, I'm like, that ball is always going in. Like Dirk in his prime, the ball's always going in. Harper is such an elite shooter when he's open and off the dribble that, and, you know, he didn't have the the Elite game in the Elite Eight. Brown did. But Harper's such a great shooter. Brown is such a great shooter. They can really, really shoot the lights out. So I'm not shocked that they're here. I had them here. The question becomes, this is the tougher game. If you're going to bet on this game, this is a really hard game to bet on because I don't love laying 6 points.
That's a lot.
But at the same time, it's a lot. It's a lot of points. Again, because of what we talked about. It can be a 3-point game, and then all of a sudden they miss a 3, Virginia knocks down 2 twos, and then they miss another bad 3 because they just had to take a bad 3, and they knock down another 2 twos, and you lose by 7. Like, it's such a hard game. And conversely, right? Like, it could easily be a 6-point game and a random layup goes in at the end. Like, it's just such a hard game. It's a lot of points to lay in the Final Four. It's a lot of points to lay considering how quickly Auburn can score and how Virginia doesn't want to score. Like,
right.
They would love to hold the ball and initiate offense with 8 seconds left on the clock. And the shot clock.
But to that end, wouldn't you? I know you don't like to play the over/under, and that's, to me, particularly NBA over/under is about the diciest bet that you can make. I think college basketball is right there. But with that in mind, the numbers is set at 131, what I'm looking at, and 132 for the other game. I would think 131, you're probably going under on that, right?
So you would think because of the way Virginia plays, right? Virginia, I mean, those styles, Auburn, Virginia, that game, they're literally going to be battling on control of tempo the entire time. Virginia's not going to want to play tempo. Auburn's going to want to play tempo. Auburn's going to want to play tempo on made baskets, like get it off the net and go.
Right.
So you would.
If you're playing Virginia, you got to believe that they're going to control the tempo.
Yeah, you would. But here's the interesting part about Virginia. They have 2 first-round picks, 2 guys that are going to play in the NBA next year and going to be first-round picks. And in addition to that, those 2 guys are not even the deadliest guys on the team offensively. How a guy can make 6 3-pointers at any given point, right? So although they play a slow tempo, and although they want to play a slow tempo, and there were literally moments where Ty Jerome's got the ball on his hip and waiting until the clock's down to 10 before initiating the offense. They're going to have offensive possessions like that all night. Having said that, they have guys that can score. They have guys that can specifically make 3-pointers. I mean, their best 3 players make 3-pointers. So that over-under is scary, scary. And although this is probably against like conventional wisdom, if I had to, you pointed a gun in my head and said, pick the over-under on that one, I would pick the over.
Yeah, okay.
The 131, I would pick the over. Like, I think Virginia will surprise you with their, I don't want to use the word prowess, but they have offensively skilled players.
Yeah.
And those guys can make threes, especially Ty, Kyle, and DeAndre Hunter. Like, these are good. I mean, they just don't play that style. They play a grind-out game. Like, when the Pistons were winning titles or won a title in the early 2000s, I mean, Chauncey, Rip, and Rasheed Wallace were all 3 great offensive players. They just were playing an offensive style.
I get that, but all that said, I look at the tournament to this point. They got 80 against Purdue going to overtime. They beat Oregon scoring 53. They didn't even break. It was 53-49. I mean, they barely broke 100. You could say that. That's where I hear what you're saying, and probably the safe bet is just not to touch it, because I think as much because of Virginia being efficient in being able to score, and that Auburn is going to push the pace, and maybe Virginia's going to have to score more, even if it's not fast. They're going to have to score more than they're comfortable scoring, right?
Yep.
They're going to have to put them up a little quicker. So I get staying away from it, but boy, it's one of those where you look at the numbers and you say that 130. I understand anybody who would play it under who would be tempted by it anyway.
Yeah. I think what you said makes sense rationally. And to be honest with you, like, if Virginia gets in trouble, gets down 14, 15 points, you have to love the under versus loving the over, because the way Virginia plays is, I call them like a python. Like they squeeze and
Yeah.
they squeeze and they squeeze, right? So if Auburn gets ahead, it's not like, oh, Virginia doesn't play like, oh, we got to chuck a bunch of threes to catch up. They play more like, we're just going to shut you out for the next 8 minutes.
Right.
And that's how we're going to catch up.
Right.
You're right. I mean, you're right. The under is that's a good argument. I just made the argument for the over. That's a good argument if you had to play it.
But the
That's a
fact,
good
yeah,
argument to play.
here, the fact that you can make an argument, a strong argument either way, means just stay away from it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. Yeah, that's exactly right, Rick.
Right.
I don't gamble that way, right? I don't gamble like I got to touch everything. I got to gamble on everything. I mean, it's ironic. I watch a lot of college basketball, and I've had NBA scouts and front office people say you watch more college basketball than anybody I know because I'm literally doing research on everything, but I don't have to touch it.
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this game.
Right.
It's just too scary.
Now, is that the same?
And over-under is scary.
Is that the same excuse when your girlfriend catches you watching porn? You tell her, I'm just doing research. I'm just doing research.
Interestingly enough, Rick, I am...
Either you don't watch porn or you don't have a girlfriend. Which one?
well, both of those things. Actually, both of those things. Interestingly enough, like I am... Yes, I do not have a girlfriend. So hopefully you have some women listeners that can get a hold of you via DM.
You make them a couple bucks.
Media.
You'd be amazed at how they turn.
I know, right?
Yep.
Yeah, make them a couple bucks, win a couple bucks myself, and maybe I can take them out on a nice date.
There you go.
Yeah, Rick, I am anti-porn for myself, not the industry, but I just don't care for it. Like, I never saw the need to watch porn and go to the strip club. I don't get it.
There you go.
It's not for me.
I'm with you. It was the throwaway line.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
I don't know your business. So
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm big into porn.
I go down that rabbit hole.
I'm really big into
right
porn.
down that rabbit hole.
All right.
But I'll tell you this. So, Rick,
Yeah.
getting back on the point at hand, what I'm going, besides the Michigan minus 2.5, what I'm going to bet this weekend, heavy, is a couple $1,000 on, I like to do this. Virginia money line, Michigan State money line. Because the way I look at it is like, what do I know? What do I believe is going to happen?
Yeah.
It's only a 2-team parlay, so it's not so like crazy where I got to win 4 or 5 games. I got to win 2 games that I believe. In this case, they both happen to be the favorites. Obviously, not super heavy favorites. If you pair that together, Michigan State and Virginia money line, it's a plus 122, which is not terrible.
No.
Right. So if
Yeah.
you put a couple, I'm not saying I'm putting $5,000 on it, but you put $5,000 on it, you're making $5,700 back.
Yeah.
So it's not a terrible bet. That's what I'm going to do this weekend heavy. That's what I believe is going to happen. I'm sure I'm going to sweat it out like most people. Because honestly, this has been a good tournament and 4 really good teams that are playing good basketball right now.
Burton, appreciate you jumping on and into the friend circle. And we will check back with you next week, see how you did. We may even have to circle back and have you on, and we'll talk about the final, depending on who gets there and how.
Rick, I appreciate you having me. I got to let you know that you're my first ever podcast.
Is that right?
Coming out of the shadows.
Wow.
Yeah. It's the first time as a guest on a podcast. I'm actually launching my podcast next month, so I'm going to get you on there.
Okay.
What do you think about this? What do you think about this name for the pod? I have not circled in or honed in on a name, but what do you think about full body?
Full
That's how
body?
I like my women. That's how I like my wine. Full body.
Let's spitball a little bit. I think we can do better.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm just having a glass of Malbec, and the bartender convinced me that, this is a full body one. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's how I like my women.
There you go. All right.
All right, Rick. I appreciate you, man.
Yep. Appreciate you, Burton. We'll talk again. Thank you. So it turns out I made a little news with my appearances on FS1 earlier this week when I was quoted as saying, "It's done. He's leaving," in reference to Kevin Durant's pending free agency with the Golden State Warriors. I say made news with air quotes rather than broke news, more air quotes, because I didn't say anything that hasn't already been said by me or somebody else. For those who didn't actually see my appearance on The Herd with Colin Cowherd, Colin started out by telling me his friend Bill Simmons, now with HBO, and my former colleague at ESPN, keeps telling him when it comes to the rumors that KD is leaving the Warriors, and this is what Bill has been saying to Colin, it's done. And Colin says, nothing against Bill, but I don't believe him. Am I out of my gourd? That was his question to me. To which I responded, from everything I've heard, it's done. And Colin says, he's leaving? And I say, he's leaving. I then immediately launched into why KD would leave the Warriors, a team that he's won 2 championships with and could possibly win a third with this June. I went to immediately explaining why, because I felt that that's really what most people don't understand. Little did I know, when me saying it's done, he's leaving, went viral, it surprised me as much as anything going viral these days can, which is to say, it amused me more than anything. A couple people on social media suggested I said what I said for attention, as clickbait, in order to make myself part of the story. Look, I don't really think that way. If I did, I'd be better at it and make Stephen A. money, who, by the way, is very good at doing that very thing. I'm not mad at him for it, but it's not what I do because it's not how I think. In hindsight, I probably wouldn't have used the word done if Colin hadn't said it. It became the word that everybody hung on, in the same way the piece that I did on the yin and yang of playing with LeBron James and Kevin Durant said the environment around LeBron is toxic, people immediately latched on to KD saying that the environment around LeBron is toxic without considering why he was using that word or who he was referring to in saying it, which wasn't LeBron. But I digress. Anyway, I probably wouldn't have used the word done if Colin hadn't said it. I felt as if I was saying, yeah, I'm hearing the same thing. Emphasis on same thing as someone else is hearing. But me saying it's done clearly became the star of aggregation everywhere. And on one hand, look, in hindsight, I get it. Bill Simmons has a much bigger profile than I do, but he's not considered an NBA expert, and he's never been a reporter. Bill says a lot of things. Always entertaining, always interesting, not always factually correct, and I don't know what the percentage is on the amount that's taken seriously, but it's probably not the same as when I say something. In any event, me saying it's done in regard to KD carries more weight and more meaning than Bill saying it. I get that. But this is not the first time I've talked about my belief that KD is headed to the Knicks. Maybe it's just that I offered qualifiers or caveats in those previous instances. First one I'd use is I would say I haven't heard this from KD or his business manager, which is true. The second is that if the Warriors win another championship, the bonding experience of it and the opportunity then to go for something never done in the last 5 decades, which is win 4 in a row, could potentially change his mind. Or third, that he could wake up one day and decide to fire his representation and his business manager and surround himself with an entirely different circle, one that doesn't have ties to New York and one that doesn't feed into his desire to be something bigger than just a basketball star, and in the same way as LeBron James, to be a success in business. That is one of the things that KD very much wants to do. That's a fact. He's talked about it. Now, there are 2 levels of sources when it comes to people talking about what KD plans to do. There are people around the league, GMs, executives, scouts, whatnot, who you can ask, what do you think KD is going to do? And they will give you a response. Sometimes it's informed based on people they've talked to. Sometimes it's just their experience in the business. And it's generally my job or any reporter's job to find out what they're basing their opinion on. And then you get a sense of whether this is just them reading tea leaves or utilizing their experience, or who they've talked to and how close those sources are to KD. Now, there's also another circle that is not KD or his business manager, and that is the people that have some sort of vested interest in KD, whether it's the Knicks or it's the Warriors or it's his business interests or it's his shoe company, people that it matters to them where KD might be continuing his future. And people who, while KD may ultimately make the decision on July 1st, people who have to prepare well before that. Ryan Hollins on our podcast the other day said that LeBron James was working a couple of years in advance in preparation to go to the Lakers. Now, I don't know. I don't know that, but I do know that when these things happen, they don't happen on July 1. There is preparation, and ultimately the decision is made. At a certain point, guy puts his John Hancock on the dotted line or accepts the call and says, yes, I'm coming. But the preparation and the planning, that happens well in advance. And the people that I've talked to in both of those circles, GMs, executives in the league, as well as people who would have more of a vested interest in what KD does, they have, without fail, and sometimes without solicitation, said that he's going to New York. On the other hand, I haven't heard anybody from either of those camps who, certainly not in recent months, has said he's staying. Now, people hope he will. People speculate that he will. Why would he leave the Warriors? That's always the starting point. Look what he's got. He's not leaving that. That would be crazy. That's where Colin started. But that's not the same as the people that I'm talking to and basing my knowledge on. Now, anyone who listens to this podcast or reads my work or has heard me on radio or TV knows that I believe words are important. How they're used, how they're ordered, how they're said. And we oftenly run roughshod on that in today's world. So I take responsibility for what I said, if not for what it became. And the truth is, since my conversation with Colin, I've had several more sources, rather than say, hey, you might have gone a little too far there, which does happen. They offered me more information that KD is indeed going to the Knicks. That it is, in their minds, and they said it, a done deal. Now, for all of you out there saying only KD can make that decision, if it doesn't come from KD, I'm not believing it. But that's fine. Honestly, I'm not going to believe it until KD does it. But if you're asking me what I'm hearing and where I think this is headed, that's what I'm going to tell you. That's what I think he plans to do. Emphasis on right now. This isn't, by the way, LeBron choosing to go to the Lakers. Sight unseen when it came to who else would be on the roster. And that's another factor here. KD is going to want to know who he is playing with. New York, no doubt, is informing him or his people who that could be. Ultimately, who it is and do they get that done? That's part of the equation, no doubt about it. I have a confidence that New York is going to be able to do that. Which brings us to another part of this whole story that I've heard more than once. And that's that KD wants Kyrie Irving to join him, or Kyrie would like to join KD, or that the two of them would love to play together in New York. Now, if words are important, those three sentences each express something a little different. Whichever you pick, and I'm not picking one, not yet. Whichever you pick, I remain skeptical, at least in part because I'm still not convinced that the two of them are boys as much as that would suggest that they are. Now, my skepticism has diminished a little because I was where's the connection? And I was told that it was through the national team. They hung out. They enjoyed each other. They'd be on the side basket playing one-on-one all the time. No doubt they envisioned from that, in some ways in the same way Chris Bosh, LeBron, and Dwayne Wade got the opportunity to get close before they joined forces in Miami. It was sort of the same prism. Now, the latest I've heard, and keep this strictly in the hot rumor file, is that KD would love to play with Jimmy Butler in New York as well, that it would be the three of them, which is really interesting. And especially in this day and age, and the NBA, as I've said, is a transaction league, we get more excitement and intrigue from imagining who's going to be playing with whom where than we do in actually watching the games. Now, I've also heard that the Knicks would be willing to make a deal for Anthony Davis this summer and would even dangle the number one pick if that's what it took to get him there, and that's what KD wanted. One last thing. Don't confuse me or any other national writer or analyst, but especially me, talking about such big stars going to the Knicks as more of the same. I know the New York media has every star that becomes available supposedly expressing interest, or New York is the place they need to go, or they're on the Knicks radar. I've heard it all. And I've rarely bought into or endorsed those reports, and yes, I'm back to using air quotes, unless I have heard the same. And in so many cases, more often than not, I have not. Now, the other item connected with me this week that has gone viral is a poll of a dozen players on who should be this year's MVP. It spawned from a story that I did talking to players about that subject. And that was part of a week for Bleacher Report on the MVP from a variety of angles. And this was my contribution. Now, I did the reporting in conjunction with working on 2 other stories. If this had been my focus, I would have tried to talk to, I ultimately quoted 10. I probably talked to, 14 or 15. But in any case, I would have tried to get far more players and had a more in-depth poll or survey, if you will. I got what I could. And so what we did is we extrapolated a poll from the 10 guys that I quoted, and the final result was 7 out of 10 picked James Harden, 1 said Paul George, that was Evan Turner from the Blazers, and 2 said Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, I found that interesting in light of a Bleacher Report poll of its writers, which I was not a part of, who were unanimous in picking Giannis as the MVP. And the reason I find that interesting is because the arguments illustrated the stark difference between how players see the game versus how the media sees it. The reason I did my story, it was from a conversation that I had with Steph Curry about a year ago, and we were talking about how I go about trying to decide MVP and the different things that go into it, and it's a little bit apples and oranges, and how do you find the most important things. And he appreciated that there was that much thought that went into it, but he said the players know. Players don't have to look at spreadsheets. They don't have to look at scoring averages. They may look at win-loss records, but it's more a visceral experience of watching, preparing, playing against guys. And you just know that guy who was at the heart of his team, who his team could not possibly be doing what it's doing without him, and that he is vital more often than not in every outcome and is having a special year in doing it. And so that's why I wanted to find out. That's how I approached every player and saying, okay, so Steph says you guys just know. So in that light, who's your MVP? And that's what I got. Now, the difference between the Bleacher Report poll and the poll of the players from my story is there was this stark difference between how players see the game and how the media sees it, and how they rate players. A team system, the level of competition, when and what kind of plays a player makes, all of that weighs heavy with them. They see it through the eyes of a fellow competitor. What does this guy do to me? What does he do to my team? How hard is he to stop? How hard is he to game plan for? How hard is he to have an answer for? And for them, or the vast majority, Harden playing in the West, demonstrating this year that his sweet spot basically is anywhere on the floor, being their unquestionable, their number one closer, doing it regardless of who was on the floor, in spite of the injuries, whatever. And then the Rockets, despite a really bad start, still ending up with one of the top records in the West. All of that meant more to the players. Now, when it came to the writers, it was all about statistical comparisons, efficiency, projections, win-loss record. Like, if he played the same amount of minutes as Harden did, what would his numbers be? It's really kind of a esoteric, ethereal view of the game. I get it, but it really takes the game off the court and puts it on paper. The players are looking at Giannis played against a weaker East. He had shooters, around him to give him the space for him to operate. And he shared the load when it came to winning games in need a bucket situations. So, and here's the thing. I usually weigh both of those things. I'll talk to players. I'll talk to coaches. I'll look at the stats. I'll look at the analytics. But this year, it just seems more than ever, which of those two you pick is going to determine which of those you choose. And it's why Harden is going to be at the top of my MVP ballot. And Bucks coach Mike Budenholzer is going to be at the top of my Coach of the Year ballot. I have little doubt that Giannis will be an MVP. He might even be one this year. He's just not my first choice. Not this year. All right. That does it for this episode of Bucher and Friends. I'll be joined in the next podcast with the illustrious Super Bowl champ Will Blackman, as well as a return visit from Burton Chawla, now known as the Accountant. And yes, I'm using both air quotes and capital letters on that one. But we'll get him back to get his take on who will win Monday night's NCAA championship and how we should play that, again, at mybookie.ag, mybookie.ag. Have a little fun. Put a couple bucks after you hear what Burton has to say about Monday night's game. Put a couple bucks on it, and if you put a couple bucks into the account the first time, however many you put in there, if you put my name in the promo code, then MyBookie will give you a 50% bump on whatever money you're playing with. So add to your scratch before you even begin to bet. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening.